Our next speaker is going to build on this background. As you said, this is really presenting the ideal situations and equipment for traveling in a wheelchair. And then we know that the ideal can't always be realized, and you do the best you can. But our next speaker, Carolyn Derryman, is going to, she's a public health nurse in Baltimore County Department of Health, and she's a child passenger safety technician, but she's also the parent of a child with special needs, so she really has lived and breathed this for a while and has been very proactive in looking at the issues of transportation with her son, and she's going to share her perspective and her insight for a little bit, and then we'll have time for questions. So, all right, Carolyn?
Okay, thank you. So I'll be building on what Therese presented. A little bit of it is overlap, but that's to be expected. So I was kind of looking at this again in my role as a safety tech. I have that information, but also my son is in a wheelchair, has been his whole life, so I bring that perspective. The first point, of course, is as a parent, when you're choosing a new wheelchair or ordering, that can be a very confusing time, but because you're a little bit at the mercy of your vendor who is suggesting all of these different features, and if it's your first wheelchair, you just may not know what you need. But certainly having it transit ready with the 4-point securement points, as Therese mentioned, having it crash tested are extremely important. Really, as a parent, I think it comes down to what can you physically handle in terms of can you get a full-size wheelchair, or do you have to get a lightweight stroller? And so as a parent, I think you're constantly balancing or juggling all these different competing needs, because there are the needs of your child in terms of the best positioning. There are your needs in terms of what can you safely handle or pick up, and then also are you what kind of vehicle are you transporting in yourself? So all of this has to be juggled. I think I'm now on I just recently I've lost track. It's either my third wheelchair or my fourth, but I'm still learning. I think it's my third wheelchair. And I call it the Beast because it's probably about 70 or 80 pounds. So here I'm sort of comparing different chairs and some of the different points. So basically I'm looking at a manual wheelchair where it's much heavier, it's sturdier, it's going to last longer. It's going to be better positioning usually for your child because you can have thoracic supports and a pelvic support. You're going to have a better headrest. You may have a tilt in space where you can lean your child back if your child needs to be tilted backward for certain periods of the day. You may also have a folding wheelchair, which may help you as a parent. You're going to have what I call a tray, but I think they call it a therapeutic flat surface or something. And then the other option is, of course, a lightweight stroller. So as a parent, this is going to be much easier to handle. You can see, this is actually my child modeling here. You can see us out in the snow. So you can navigate a lightweight stroller because it has bigger, fatter wheels over mulch or snow or uneven surfaces much, much better. So it's easier to maneuver. It's lighter. It folds up, it can fit into the trunk of a small car. However, physical therapists basically hate them. They are poor, not as good positioning for your child. It's a fixed tilt, it's a fixed position for your child. So I myself have avoided these as much as possible, but I have had both chairs for the last couple of years, and I think that's the best of all possible worlds. As a parent, if you can have both, so your main wheelchair for everyday use and for going to school, and then a lightweight stroller for special circumstances or as a backup. And I recently had a situation where my adapted van was in the repair shop, and I had no choice but to use the lightweight stroller and an alternate car, and that really saved my life. So if you're using an adapted van, of course, the ideal is to transfer your child into the vehicle seat. That is the ideal. However, you have just spent $50,000 on this van, and to not transport your child in the wheelchair just seems to be not really a practical way to go. Of course, when my child was much younger, or when you're dealing with a child from, say, 1 to 8 years old, it is much easier to transfer them into the vehicle seat. And then you can use your van to transport the empty wheelchair. But as your child gets older and older, or if you have a child who you simply cannot transfer due to their medical reasons, then you're transporting in the wheelchair just like this. There you have an example of a Q-straint locking. It's an automatic retractor. So again, when you buy a van as a parent, you're going to be shown all these different options. And when we first bought the van, we were given the standard tie-down options, which I will tell you takes about 10 or 15 minutes to secure. It was not the easiest thing in the world. You are bending over, hurting your back, and you are securing each of those 4 points, and you have to physically pull out the slack on each one, as well as get the vehicle seat around your child. So we went with an auto retractor later, which we bought as a separate and installed ourselves. So as you can see, we have the floor adaptation, and we were able to easily install it. So the automatic retractors make for a much faster tie down. Then you also have what's called a docking station, which again, the vendor that adapts the van is installing a docking station into the floor of your van. And that is, I haven't used it directly, but it's a really fast securement where you just click the wheelchair into this floor docking station, and it's a one-step process. Although other parents have told me that their wheelchair moves even after it's been docked. So I don't have personal experience with that. Of course, securing your child then, so here's the occupant restraint part. On my van, we're using the lap and shoulder belt to go around the wheelchair. So again, it's just like any other, just like in a vehicle seat, you want the proper, as close to ideal lap and shoulder belt. I will tell you that the reality, it's very difficult to get a perfect fit because of how far back that shoulder belt. You can see in this interior picture, this is actually my van. The shoulder belt attachment is so far back, it's difficult to get an ideal placement across the clavicle. You can see there that there are these positioning devices, so what we call the postural restraints. This is a positioning vest and also pelvic positioning straps that my son has. So again, those are to position him better in the wheelchair, not for transport. But when you're dealing with all kinds of other people transporting, there is a lot of misinformation, and a lot of people feel that those positioning vests or these small positioning things that come with your wheelchair are adequate for transportation, and they're not. As we all know, they have not been crash tested. They don't have the same tensile strength as your vehicle seat belt. Then, of course, you have all the other things that you're bringing with your child. So you may have medical equipment. We almost always bring a tray. So all these things have to be secured in the trunk of your car or, somehow tied down as far away as possible. So again, the more medically involved your child has, they may have oxygen tanks, portable ventilators, all kinds of equipment. And it is very tricky, but you're trying to secure it as best you can, under the other seats. So, of course, the other option, and I've seen many classmates and other children with special needs being transported in a regular passenger car or van. So then, of course, you, as a parent, you need to choose whatever is appropriate for your child's age, weight, and height, whether it's a commercially available car seat or transporting them usually into the vehicle seat. And I have watched a lot of families do this, and some people will transport their teenage daughter into their SUV, and then they will just literally pick up the entire wheelchair and put it in the back of the trunk. But then you're dealing with your own safety issues. And as a parent, I can tell you, if you throw your back out or hurt your back, you can no longer take care of your child. So protecting yourself as a parent is extremely important. So that's where the stroller may come into play. It may be that you have to have a lightweight stroller that is foldable, so you can fold it up and put it in your trunk. And that did recently happen to me, where I had to transport my son in a small sedan, and I had to fold up the stroller. So I was grateful to have it then, because otherwise I would have not been able to bring his chair with him. And again, then you're putting all your other devices and your other equipment under the seats as securely as you can. I do have some word here also about funding and insurance. So of course that's a huge issue for parents, is who's going to pay for all this. Once you get into the world of special needs, nothing is cheap. What I've discovered is that insurances don't want to pay for a stroller if they're already paying for a wheelchair. So I was able to get a stroller funded through LIST funding, which is the DDA. And I have, in my resource page, I have a link to that. That funding has now gone down now. It's now $2,000 a year, and it's done on a lottery system. So as a parent, you enter the lottery and you hope you win, basically. But that may be a little fair. The older method was, it was first come, first serve, and within a week, all the funding was gone. So now LIST is accepting funding through the entire month of July, and then again the entire month of January. And as long as you get your application in the month, you have a chance at getting the lottery funding. So my last couple slides deal with, just as a parent, again, advocating for your child. Teresa already mentioned, the whole school viewpoint, and I think as a parent, you do want transportation and you do want this procedure to go on your child's IEP, which is their individual education plan. And I think that alerts everyone at the school and everyone at the table that, what you're requesting as a parent. The other thing to keep in mind is when you're transporting trays, there are also special bags that fit over the school bus. And in fact, I learned this from Therese. And I think you just shouldn't make assumptions that everybody's doing everything correctly unless you are witnessing it. So I discovered this with my own school system, that they were not putting the lap and shoulder belt around my child. So I had to speak up, and a lot of training was done, and I think they've come a long way. So now the tray is being transported in a special bag, and it's secured over the school bus seat. Of course, the wheelchair is tied down correctly, and the lap and shoulder belt is going around. So, you just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and that all your bus systems are being trained in the best possible practices. Same with everyone else you might be transporting. You may participate in an after-school program. They may be going on field trips. So you need to be looking at that as a parent. Are they using large school buses, or are they using small box vans? What kind of tie-down are they using? And are they using a travel vest, or are they putting your child in a vehicle seat? So you need to look at all that. Of course, your extended family, they may not understand the importance of, again, that the lap and shoulder belt has to go around your child, even though they have a seat belt on their wheelchair. So there's a lot of miscommunication. What I discovered in bringing up this issue with people is that a physical therapist may have one viewpoint, and your bus driver thinks something else, and your school personnel thinks something else, and even the fellow parents that you talk to also may have another opinion. So there is a lot of miscommunication, certainly involving, even something like a tray. I used to be told that the tray absolutely had to stay on the wheelchair because it would be a projectile hazard if you took it off. And yet our wheelchair manufacturer even says the tray must be removed for transport. And now we know there is a safer alternative, which is storing it in the back of your car if you're transporting as a parent, or transporting it in a special bag if you're a school bus.
Carolyn, the tray, if it was on the wheelchair and there was a crash, would the child hit the tray or it would come off, or
Exactly.
either of those? Is that the
Exactly. It could be a hazard in terms of with abdominal injury or your child going forward and hitting their head on the tray. But even I had physical therapists stating, or other parents complaining that they wanted the tray there. So I've heard these different opinions. So another alternative is to put a hard foam over the tray, or I think even in place of the tray. So again, there are other options which need to be explored. If that child needs something in front of them for better positioning, there may be other alternatives which are going to be safer than using that hard tray surface. So again, just looking at this as a parent, I think everyone needs to try to really educate themselves about what is best for their child and make sure everyone else around you is aware of what those options are. So there's so many different ways and different solutions to the same problem. What I can just say from a parent's perspective too is that, you know, my last slide is where can parents go for more information, but honestly it's a very difficult thing because I think the child passenger safety world isn't always comfortable dealing with wheelchairs, and the wheelchair world doesn't really know about transportation. So you have these different groups and different advocates who are looking at things from their point of view, but they're not always together on this point of transportation safety. So, you know, I have a special interest in this field, so of course I'm looking at it, but I think the average parent, especially if you have a severely disabled child and you're trying to hold down a job and take care of your other children, I mean, this is not even on your radar. So unfortunately, I think, you know, much greater awareness needs to be brought to this issue, because when we see all the misuse in standard child seats and just transporting typical children, I think there's probably a huge amount of misuse in transporting children with special needs and also wheelchair transport. And people just don't know what they don't know.